Sorry, Patrick, you're solo. Ontario got me rock. Ouch. One behind for Quebec. So it's 1-0 right now. Yeah.
I apologize for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with what essentially amounts to the semi-final game in the Men's Australian Football Championship. Right now, Quebec leading Team Alberta by a count of 1-0. And that may be a score for the Quebec Saints. And waiting on the call from the goal umpire. As I said, this is the last game of the round-robin stage. Essentially, these teams playing for a spot in the final. Both teams with a record of 1-1. The winner will go on to play Team Ontario. Team Quebec plays a lot together as a team, play a lot of tournaments in the United States. As we see a free kick towards the midfield for number 39 of the Quebec Saints. Apologies, we'll try to get you updated with the numbers. This is Patrick McNeil of the Sydney Giants with the call for this contest. Again, this is essentially a semi-final game. Winner will go on to the championship. They'll play Ontario in the final. Stay tuned. We've got more great games for you coming up. Nova Scotia will be playing in the consolation game against the loser of this one. And as well, we'll have the women's grand final as well as the men's grand final. And I believe that is a behind for Quebec. So we have a score of 2-0. Kick out from the goal square by Alberta. Alberta using some players from other teams to round out their roster, but turnover to the Quebec Saints. But in the pocket now in the Alberta end. Trying to kick out along the wing. Turnover. Saints working their way into the corridor there. Number 5 with the mark for Alberta. Play stops and he'll decide to have a run and take a look for a kick. Works along the boundary. Play towards the midfield. Again, 2-0. No goals in this contest here. 2 20-minute halves in, again, what is essentially a semi-final game. Winner goes on to play Ontario in the championship. Team Alberta, we call them Alberta, but it's really a combination of an Alberta-BC team. BC has its own league, and the Alberta, primarily the Alberta players are from Edmonton, and again, they've picked up some players from the Nova Scotian team. You see Chris Bork, number 19, is looking to sub in. Apologies for the unsubtle bias, I guess, towards Nova Scotian players. Those are the ones that I'm most familiar with, but should be a strong game of footy here. And a bit of a tentative start. Some strong play in the midfield in this tournament. Points have been hard to come by, especially in the early going. Play in the midfield now. Number 1 is on for Quebec. Has light in front of him towards the goal. A lot of play along the ground here. Turn and fire. Is that going to go through for 6? And you hear the roar of the Saints. They think it's through for a goal. And the goal umpire saying it was touched, so that's just a single point. So the third behind of the game for Quebec, 3-0. And again, the Alberta-BC team just putting up enough pressure to prevent Quebec from getting into the goal-scoring area. 3-0 Quebec is a score. All behinds thus far. And if you're new to Australian football, 1 for a behind, 6 for a goal. Kick it through the middle of the post, you get 6 points. And we have a prime free kick here for number 9 of Quebec. And that is going to go wide to his right. And I believe that is another behind for the Quebec Saints. So 4-0 for Quebec. All behinds thus far. And following behind the team that has just been scored upon will get to kick out of the goal square. As Alberta BC looks to work through off the wing and then try to work up the field. Play along inside the 50-meter line where most of the game has been contested thus far. There's a mark in front. He'll play on. And that'll be a goal for Quebec. First one of the game, and it's 10-0 for Quebec over the Alberta BC team. And again, the Alberta BC team not heavily manned, so they pick up a few reinforcements for this game. Alberta A lot of their players coming from the Edmonton area. Have a team in Calgary, but I don't believe there's much representation from Calgary. BC has its own league, so they are contributing some players as well. And Team Quebec has a 9-a-side league, so these players are very used to playing both against each other and with each other. They play against each other in 9-on-9s, and they play with each other. Play a lot against American teams, of course, good proximity to the U.S. border, so a lot of people in the United States footy scene are very familiar with the Quebec Saints. Center clearance following the Quebec goal. Again, Quebec leading 1 goal and 4 behind to no score for Alberta. So it is 10-0 handball as the Saints look to work through the corridor. Play in the middle of the field. There's number 17 on. Number 17 on number 17, in fact. And it looked like that might be a mark, but the ball turned over. Here at Humber College in Etobicoke, Ontario, host of the 2018 Canadian National Australian Football Championship. As I said earlier, this is what is essentially a semifinal game between Team Quebec and Team Alberta BC. Quebec is in white, the white jumpers with the blue shorts, and Alberta BC is in the all blue jumpers. Really have to give a shout out to all the designers. A lot of great kits in this tournament. And it is a goal for Team Quebec, so 16-0. Apologies for not being on the ball for that goal. It looked like we had an injury on the play. Number 49 for Quebec is a bit slow to get up, and he's going to be assisted off the field. I can see in front of me they have number 40s in the interchange gate, so we'll see if there's going to be a substitution here. Again, Australian football played 18-a-side, but there are modifications. Not every team able to provide the same amount of players. It's not necessarily easy to make your way to Ontario for a weekend, but a number of these players have done it and are happy to do so. And certainly warm weather, and there are a lot of spectators, I guess we could say, enjoying the heat. Heard it was pushing near 40 with the humid X, so the players are having to work for it. Hydration has been the key for sure for everybody involved in this tournament. Actually, I spoke with one of the servers Friday night at the event party, and she said it was the most glasses of water she'd ever served at a bar before, so everybody was making sure they were hydrated and staying away from the other stuff that would prohibit a good performance today. Play back on in the midfield. Looked like it was going to be marked for Team Quebec, but play goes on. Kick towards the center. Again, Quebec has the play in this game. They do lead by a count of 16-0, 2 goals, 4 behinds. No score yet for Alberta. Here's another chance on for Quebec. And waiting for the ruling of the goal umpire here. I believe that's going to be behind for Quebec. And that is indeed the call. So 17-0 for Quebec over Alberta. 2 goals and 5 behinds for the Quebec Saints, and no points for Alberta BC. Play now in the Alberta BC end, and they just have to try to get it towards the midfield. They've been pinned in their side in their 50 for most of this game, and that's not where they want to be. Play towards center, almost an intercept mark for number 35, and Quebec with the numbers in the middle of the field. Alberta BC trying to make their way down. 35 pushes it forward for Quebec. Bit of a scrum here towards the midfield. And again, this is probably the closest that Alberta BC has come to the Quebec goal, and they want to get a little closer, see if they can get some action in that Quebec 50-meter line. But it is going to be a free kick to the Saints. 17-0 is the score in favor of Quebec. Mark for number 14 decides to play on. Referee calls advantage, or umpire calls advantage, pardon me. And number 25 with it. Handball to number 39 for Quebec to number 40. Number 40 sells Candy to number 5. Kick through. Is that going to go for a goal? It's going to float by 4 behind, I believe. Again, this Quebec team, a lot more experience playing with each other, and you can see that with the way they move the ball. And perhaps they are a bit unlucky to only be up 18-0, but full marks for the Alberta team that's certainly hustling out here. And again, it's Alberta BC. Apologies if I'm using shorthand for that team, but hello to everybody watching, and apologies for the lack of knowledge on the players, just kind of working as we go here. Again, 18-0 is the score to the Saints. Run on here for Quebec. Kick to the goal square. Number 40 runs towards. Number 12 gets in his way, but still an opportunity here for Quebec, and a great bump there for Alberta BC to try to move the ball towards midfield. And ball through just outside the 50-meter. Number 9 for Quebec. Kicks towards the goal square. Will that be an intercept mark? Ball's going to just float. It looks like that's out on the full, or is that going to be a throw-in? We'll have to see who takes the ball. It is going to be Alberta ball outside the boundary behind their behind posts. So again, 2 goals and 6 behinds for Quebec. No score yet for Alberta, BC. Number 6 for Alberta, BC tries to move the ball forward. Looks like play's been blown down again. And it is a free kick for Alberta, BC in their own zone. Nice kick towards the middle of the field. Some pushing and shoving there towards center. Number 46 boots it down for Quebec, and almost a mark. Ends up going through the arms. And number 25 will boot it through. Play in the pocket in the Alberta, BC zone. And kick in the goal square. Is that going to be another behind for Quebec, or is that going to be a goal? I think they're going to say that hit the post. So waiting for the flag to wave. They wave 1 flag if it's a behind, 2 flags if it's a goal. Watching the goal umpire is often one of the more fun parts of Australian football. They tend to get pretty animated, and it's a great job to have. You get a great view of the action. So 19-0 is the score in favor of Quebec. 2 goals and 7 behinds. Play in the midfield here. Good tackle there by number 22 for Alberta, BC. I believe that is going to be a clearance. I don't think he had it long enough for that to be holding the ball. And it is indeed going to be ball up here. Good knock there by number 6 for Alberta, BC as they make their way into the Quebec 50. 15 for Alberta, BC. Had an opportunity, but Quebec will take possession. Play now in the Quebec half of the field. And Alberta, BC trying to create some pressure. Play along the boundary here towards the interchange gates. Here's number 40 for Quebec. He'll kick it down into the pocket. Number 19 pushing on it. Number 1 there as well. Play along the ground here close to the goalposts. Number 1 manages to keep it in play, throws it towards the goal square. Of course, I say throw, but he has to actually punch it. Throwing not allowed in this sport. It's not rugby, it's Australian football. 17 for Alberta. Turns it over the goal square. Prime opportunity here for Quebec. It looks like that kick is going to be offline. And that is going to be an Alberta possession. Alberta BC possession down to the boundary. So no score on that play. 2-7-0 is the score. So Quebec leads 19-0. 2 goals and 7 behinds. And again, Alberta BC a little short on numbers, so they're getting some Nova Scotian support here as Chris Bork subs into the game. There's number 14. Kicks towards the goal. Is that going to drift in? No, it's going to go offline. And it looks like that'll be out on the full. So 19-0 is the score in favor of Team Quebec. Quebec putting the pressure on. Here in this first half of this game, and again, this essentially amounts to a semifinal contest. That is a behind for Quebec. 20-0 is the score. 2 goals, 8 behinds for Quebec. No score yet for Alberta. This essentially amounts to a semifinal contest. Both of these teams 1-1 thus far. They both defeated Nova Scotia, and they both lost to Team Ontario. So the winner will get the privilege of playing Ontario again in the grand final of this tournament. Here's some pressure for Alberta BC. Number 15 buzzing around the goal square here. And play comes back towards the midfield. And number 10 with a clear kick for Alberta BC. Who does he have? Does he have anybody in the goal square? Oh! And are they going to call that a mark for Alberta BC? As all the action floods into the goal square of Quebec. And it is a free kick indeed for number 8 of the Alberta BC team. He kicks across the field. Good option. And now number 2 with a free kick off the mark. He'll back up. Looks like he's just about back at the 50-meter line. Prime opportunity, best opportunity that Alberta BC has had to get on the scoreboard today. Again, 20-0 the score line for Quebec. And number 2, that kick looks good. Is that going to go through for 6? No, it didn't quite make it, but Alberta BC keeps the pressure on. Here's a clear kick. And is that going to go through? That's a score for Team Alberta BC. And 20-6 is the score. And despite the fact that Quebec has had primarily most of the possession, this is certainly not over by any stretch of the imagination. Alberta BC with some good pushback here. And lots of time left. We're still in the first half, so certainly an opportunity as Alberta BC looks to climb their way into that championship game. Of course, Quebec wants to be there as well. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Quebec plays together a lot as a team. Alberta BC obviously not as much, two different provinces teaming up. But some of these players are familiar with each other, playing either with or against each other. Ball up for the center clearance. And Alberta BC wins it, trying to build off that goal. 20-6 is the score. 2-8 to 1-0 here in favor of Quebec. Play along the boundary towards the 50-meter of Team Alberta BC. Quebec in possession here. Is that going to be called a throw? Nope, play goes on in favor of Quebec. Handball across, linked to number 9. Number 9 with a kick. Clear shot at goal. Is that going to go through for 6? Look good from my point of view. And number 9 with a big fist pump. He's pretty pumped up to have scored that goal. And that's a big one for Team Quebec as they take a 26-6 lead. As Alberta BC was really starting to take the pressure after a rough start. So that's a big one for Quebec to try to get the game back on their side. As there'll be a center clearance following the goal. Welcome to viewers all across Canada, wherever you may be watching. Happy Canada Day to everybody. And again, it's a scorcher here today in Ontario. It's been like this all weekend. Temperature's been in the low 30s. Humidex pushing that up into the early 40s. And as someone who's played in this tournament, I have to say it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be in terms of the heat. You just have to make sure to have your healthy supply of water and Gatorade as the ball comes up. And Quebec looking to build off that goal. Again, 26-6 in favor of Quebec. Again, that's Chris Bork, one of the Nova Scotian substitutes on this Alberta BC team. He'll played for the National Club, National Team Canada at the 2017 International Cup. Play comes down the other way towards the Alberta BC 50-meter line as Quebec in possession. Kick towards goal square. Number 19 creating havoc there for Quebec, but he's unable to pull down that mark. And play comes back towards midfield. You're seeing a lot of instances where players look like they have the mark and the ball falls out. And I think part of that is the ball's pretty slippery. Might have something to do with all the sunscreen that's probably been applied to it with players' hands. But a lot of players telling me it's been tough to hold on to the ball, and that's probably why you're seeing a lot of those near marks. Of course, the heat makes every extra step a little bit more difficult. But these guys certainly providing some good hustle out there. Number 8 kicks towards the 50-meter line. Here's pressure on for Alberta BC. Number 15, he's thrown to the ground. Is not going to be holding the ball. Nope, play goes on. Physicality ramping up here in this one. Play along the 50-meter line here, and seeing a lot of game along the ground here, and that probably benefits Alberta BC. Maybe to ugly the game up a little bit. Generally speaking, the games played along the ground, that'll tend to benefit the team that's behind, but you have to have the numbers there. You have to get players to those contests, be it in the air or on the ground. Here's number 13 for Alberta BC, and that's turned over on an intercept mark. Quebec takes possession. 25 will pick it up, as that is going to do it for the first half of play. And the Quebec club leads by a count of 26-6. 3 goals and 8 behinds for Quebec. 1 goal for Team Alberta BC. Again, this is the last game of the round robin of the men's competition. And the winning team will go on to play Ontario in the final, and the losing team will play Nova Scotia in the consolation. And 26-6 is the score. You are watching the 2018 Canadian National Australian Rules Football Championship here from Humber College in Etobicoke, Ontario. It's been a great day of footy thus far. This is day 2 of the tournament. 4 teams in the men's division, 3 teams in the women's division. Men's division consisting of the 2 teams you're seeing here, Quebec, Alberta BC being 1 team. Team Nova Scotia, who've had some supplements from Manitoba, and as well as Team Ontario. So the men's field, Team Ontario, Team Quebec, Team Nova Scotia, as well as Team Alberta BC. The women's field the same, but no Nova Scotian team. Trying our best to get the women's game to grow on the East Coast, and hopefully we'll see some female stars on the East Coast soon enough. But for now, no entrant in the women's side of this tournament. So both the men and women doing a single round robin. So yesterday, there was each team rather played 2 games on the men's side, which set up today's action. And there were 2 of the 3 games, or 3 games in total in the women's round robin. 2 of them were played yesterday. One was played, which you probably saw earlier this morning, depending on where you're watching. So there was 1 final game in the women's round robin and 2 games in the men's round robin, the last of which is being played here. So this concludes the round robin portion of both tournaments. And after this, we'll get the men's consolation final, as well as the women's and men's grand finals. And of course, this is not just about provincial pride. It's obviously an opportunity to get out there and play your sport, but it's also a showcase for the national team. I mentioned the IC Cup last year, the 2017 championship. The men won some and lost some in that tournament. Unfortunately, the women fell in the final, but a very good showing. The women actually won the prior tournament in 2014. But this is very much a showcase for that tournament. You know, I guess we could say the scouts, that's the term we can use, are evaluating players. And as someone who plays for Nova Scotia, we don't necessarily get an opportunity to play out at these tournaments a lot. So it's maybe an eye-opener for some of the people watching to see the talent that they don't get to see a lot. And what we've seen in this tournament thus far is sometimes you can have a game that may look lopsided on the score sheet, but the actual gameplay can be pretty even. And for the most part, the gameplay has been pretty competitive in this tournament. Seen some strong footy played by all 7 teams participating. And really a buzz of activity around the field. You see everybody moving along, getting ready for their games, as those who are not participating are good to watch and check out their competition, perhaps cheer on their provincial counterparts. So again, this is the halftime break of the final game of the men's round robin. It is Team Quebec versus Team Alberta, BC. Team Quebec leads by a count of 26-6. The scoreline breaks down 2 goals and 8 behinds for Team Quebec, 1 goal for Team Alberta, BC. And the winner will go on to play Team Ontario in the men's grand final. And the losing team will go on to play Team Nova Scotia in the consolation final. Now, that game was supposed to be next, but there was some concern about players playing back-to-back. So I don't know if the schedule has been changed to perhaps push the women's grand final. I know they wanted to have the men's and women's grand final back-to-back to showcase the top talent, but not sure if that is still the schedule we're looking at. I see the Ontario women are actually suiting up to my right, and getting a shout out from them right now, actually. They actually had quite the time unveiling their kits on Friday and naming their captains group. That was a big part of the welcoming event on Friday night. And as I said earlier, I have to really give props to all the kits in this tournament. A lot of really well-dressed teams here in this event. And Ontario rocking the green, black, and yellow. I heard there was some criticism of those outfits, but I actually quite like them. Now, interesting to note, Quebec, the men and women in different attire. Said the Quebec team, colloquially called the Saints on the men's side. I believe the same for the women. Quebec wears, as you would expect, white and blue, but the women's side actually wears purple. And it's not a bad look, really, as they're getting ready for their game as well. So, again, that's going to be Quebec and Ontario playing each other in the women's grand finals. The team's getting ready. Alberta, BC was also represented in the women's side of this tournament, but not playing. Their tournament is over, I should say. They've completed the round robin portion, and actually we're seeing some of the Ontario women now coming onto the field to practice some short kicks. So again, you're watching the final game of the men's round robin. It is Team Quebec against Team Alberta, BC, and it is 26-6 for Team Quebec at the half. So the way this tournament has been run, 2 20-minute halves, 10-minute break in between. And again, final game of the round robin, winning team will go on to the final. Both Quebec and Alberta, BC defeated Nova Scotia in round robin games, but both were defeated by Team Ontario. So pretty clear pecking order thus far, but we're still waiting to determine who's going to have that second spot in the grand final. And as I said, the gameplay has been pretty strong, I think, at this tournament. And I think anybody watching for evaluating talent is probably pretty happy. I was talking about the IC tournament. That's every 3 years. The last one was held this past summer, 2017, in Melbourne, Australia, which is basically the home of Australian football. If you're watching and you don't know a ton about the game, if you perhaps are watching to see a friend of yours play, it's the AFL 18-team league in Australia and recently started AFLW, a women's league, which I believe has 10 teams. And the base of it's really in Melbourne. If you know a lot about Australian geography, Melbourne is traditionally what they would call a footy city, and Sydney is very much a rugby city. But there are some sports that cross city lines, so the base of the AFL would be in Melbourne, and then there's pockets where there are other teams, a few in Sydney, a few in Perth. Perth is also an Australian football hotbed, but not as big as Melbourne. But anyway, Melbourne being the biggest home of support for Australian football is where the International Cup happens, and that's every 3 years on both the men's and the women's side. And again, the Canadian women have had success at that tournament, winning in 2014, but falling in the final in 2017 to Team Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. So again, this is probably a bit of a showcase for some of these players, and there are other events that take place on the national level. I know members of Team Nova Scotia joined members across the country in a developmental tournament of sorts in London 2 years ago. So it's not just about the national team. And really, it's if you have athletic aspirations, an interesting sport to get involved in because numbers still very much growing. I'm going to take a brief time out here as we get ready for the second half between Team Quebec and Team Alberta BC. We'll be back momentarily. Stay with us.
I didn't pay. I guess we'll find out. I don't even know which kicking down that way. No. Yeah. Wait, K-Man, which way we kicking? Ah, good. Get good. Pop it in. Recognize you with the hat. Oh yeah. I asked those who you wear.
I'll just take out a jar.
And we are back here for the second half of the final game of the round robin of the men's portion of this tournament. And again, I've been using the phraseology, essentially a semifinal game. Quebec 1-1 coming into this one. Alberta BC also 1-1. So the winning team will play Ontario in the men's grand final here on the beautiful campus of Humber College in Etobicoke, Ontario. And it is a very, very warm day here in Ontario. And really got an indication of what the famous Ontario smog was like on the drive to the field, because you could see the CN Tower, but it was more like a silhouette of the CN Tower. You could just see it through all the smoke and everything else that comes up in this city. And that's a bit of a culture shock for yours truly, who's a Nova Scotian boy, not used to these warm temperatures, but we're doing our best. Again, this is Patrick Beneil of the City Giants providing play-by-play. We've had a great cast of rotating commentators running through. Apologies that it's me running solo in this one, and I know those of you that watch the AFL probably not used to that. Usually a pair of commentators, and no disrespect to the fine performances that these athletes are putting on today, but if you're ever watching the AFL, that is not a game that anybody could call individually. That's a very, very tough sport to call at the speed they play. And again, just getting familiar with some of the players here, so apologies that the details are not on point, but I think the action is speaking for itself as we're underway here in the second half. Quebec takes possession again. Quebec leading 26-6. And the offense is on for Quebec. And do we have a score to start this second half? I don't believe so. Waiting for the call from the goal umpire. And it is going to be a throw-in from behind the goalposts in the Alberta end, or Alberta BC, pardon me. And that's a kick, and that's going to go through the behind post. So that is a score for Team Quebec. 27-6 the score. So kick from the goal square for Alberta BC. Kick up towards the 50-meter line. Now number 48 for Quebec as Quebec tries to keep the pressure on. Now number 14 will kick it down the side. And that is a mark for number 25. He's going to float back past the 50-meter line. that will be intercepted. Not an intercept mark, but the play goes the way of Alberta, BC as the ball kicked towards midfield. And play continues in the midfield. Looks like we have a free kick for Quebec. Quebec kicking to my left this second half. Alberta, BC kicking to the right. Here's number 48 for Quebec. He'll kick it towards the boundary on the right side in the pocket. And again, the Quebec team with most of the play in this one, leading by a score of 27-6. And I believe we have another behind for Quebec. So 28-6 the score here in favor of the Saints. So 3 goals, 10 behinds for Quebec. 1 goal for Alberta. Play along the boundary inside the Alberta BC zone here. And ball comes up towards the 50-meter line. And the Quebec Saints try to put on the pressure. Alberta BC trying to get the play down the other end, which is where they needed to be. 28-6 the score. As ball kicked towards the middle. Number 46 picks it up for Quebec. He wants to go the other way. He'll kick it towards the right side. And that's Chris Bork, one of the Nova Scotia players for Team Alberta BC. He'll pick the ball up, but a great spoil by one of the Quebec players. And the offense is on for Team Quebec. Play comes into the goal square, but number 17 will take it for Alberta BC. Now kick towards the goal. Is that going to go through? Wait for the ruling from the goal umpire. I think I see the 1 finger down, which means a behind again. 1 finger means a behind. 2 fingers is a goal. And it is 29-6. You're watching the Australian Football League. Of course, sometimes they'll have video review, but obviously that's not really feasible at this tournament, but we know that was a behind for sure. Play back on in the, along the boundary, I should say. Kick by number 12, puck. There's my hockey instincts coming in. Ball rather comes towards midfield. Here's 45, he'll move it to 46 for Quebec. Again, play in the midfield here. Quebec leads 29-6 on Alberta BC. Number 1 kicks it along the boundary. And is that going to be out on the full? Nope, ball will stay in play. 25 takes it for Quebec. Kicks it into the right pocket. Quebec in possession, leading this game by a count of 29-6. And again, the winner goes to the grand final to take on Team Ontario. A pretty good production setup here at this table aside the field. A few camera operators here doing a good job bringing you the scenes from Humber College. Throw in, and it'll be Team Quebec taking possession. Kick towards the goal square of Team Alberta BC. Ball almost kind of dribbled along the boundary there, and a kick through. And Alberta's claiming touched. I'm sure Quebec is waiting for the call that it's a goal, and I think that is the call indeed. It is a goal for Quebec. So 35-6 in favor of Quebec. They've had all the scoring in this second half thus far. Again, 2 20-minute halves with a 10-minute halftime. So 35-6 is the score in favor of Quebec, as there'll be a center clearance following the goal. It's amazing how this game really doesn't look like hockey in any respect, but I guess the center clearance parallel to face-off, and really the flow is very similar as well, I find. And certainly no shortage of action with 18 players out on the field. This is a dedicated Australian football oval. A lot of players don't necessarily get the opportunity to play on this kind of surface, but certainly a great facility here for this tournament. 35-6 the score in favor of Team Quebec. Here's number 20 for Alberta BC. Loses it to 22. Kick to the right side of the field towards midfield. And number 1 now with it for Team Quebec. He'll work it along the right side. Has a bounce. Hasn't seen a lot of that this tournament, but a good bounce for number 1. He'll kick it along the right side. And was looking for a mark, but not to be. But Quebec keeps the pressure on in the 50-meter zone now. There's a kick, and is that going to be a goal? I believe that is a behind. You see the flag motion. It is indeed a behind. So 36-6 the score in favor of Team Quebec. And Alberta BC will take possession of the ball, or at least they think they're taking possession. Number 5 having discussions about whose ball that is. As he'll move back for a free kick. Alberta BC looking to break out. Kick towards midfield. And 36-6 is the score in favor of Team Quebec. Kick towards the boundary. And Alberta BC looking to generate some offensive pressure. And number 15 there for Alberta BC. Turn the ball over. Number 50 for Quebec works along the left side of the field. Kicks it down. And it is going to remain Quebec possession. Handball there for number 14 throwing the ball. Didn't quite make it, but offense still on for Quebec. Now kick back towards midfield. Here comes number 52, kicks to the right side, was just kicking to space, didn't have a target, but it may work. Number 1 hustling on the ball, hustling back. He didn't get back for the lead, but he does get possession. Handballs to number 46. Number 46 for Quebec will kick it along to the right side. Oh, almost a sliding mark there. Quebec will keep possession, a good link on the handball. As Quebec bringing the offense to Alberta. Game along the ground now. I think we're going to have a ball up. If you're not familiar with the rules of Australian football, when the ball carrier is tackled, you'll either see a ball up, which we just saw, but if the ball holder has a lot of time and then is tackled, that's called holding the ball, and the other team will receive a free kick. But in that case, there wasn't a lot of time, so it was a throw-up. Play in the pocket here. And the ball is going to be kicked out on the full for number 5. I mentioned earlier that Alberta BC using some substitutions. It seems to be the way the bench is being managed is the players that they've picked up from Nova Scotia are mainly being used as supplement players, which makes sense. They want to keep the spirit of the Alberta BC team alive. Certainly Ontario, the most well-staffed team in this tournament. They have a 9-on-9, they have an 18-on-18 league here in Alberta, 9 teams in it, so no shortage of players in that access for Team Ontario. And that is another goal for Team Quebec, as it is a 42-6 scoreline in favor of the Quebec Saints. And I was talking about the league in Ontario. Of course, not all those players are eligible because Australians can play in the Ontario League, but obviously not eligible to play in this tournament. They can if they are Canadian citizens, but that does not apply to the majority of them. Certainly that is what helps the size of the league in Ontario. So again, you're watching the final game of the men's round robin. It is Team Alberta BC taking on Team Quebec, and it is 42-6 in favor of Team Quebec. 5 goals and 12 behinds for Quebec, 1 goal for Alberta. And Alberta BC was really showing some good pushback there at the end of that second half, or first half, pardon me, but Quebec carrying the play here in the second. They were feeling footsteps, and they've acted accordingly here. And there is a great example that I was just talking about is you heard the umpire hollering out no prior. So that means you're going to see a ball up. And if the ball carrier had a little bit more time and he'd have been tackled, then the other team would get a free kick. Number 53 with it for Team Quebec. Tries to get rid of it. Ball on the ground now, knocked forward there. And ball on the boundary. Will be forced out. Play will be halted to a stop here. And thanks to the camera operators, I do have a replay screen here, and it's actually quite helpful. The only thing that's preventing me from calling the game off the screen is the glare of the sun. Makes it pretty difficult to see the screen. Again, as you could probably tell, it is pretty warm here today in suburban Toronto. There's a kick towards the goal. Intercept mark for Alberta BC as they try to move the play the other way. 42-6 is the score in favor of Quebec. 5 goals, 12 behinds to 1 goal. Nice play along the boundary here, and play will be stopped. Quebec player a bit slow to get up, but it looks like he's going to be all right. And It looks like that is a free kick for Team Quebec. Kick along the right side into the pocket. Quebec putting the pressure on here. Here's number 25. Looks for a handball play. And there's a tackle. Good pressure there by Alberta BC as they look to take the play the other way. Now number 22 with it for Alberta BC, and he'll just kick to space. Didn't have an option, but not a bad play to just kick towards the other side. And number 8 tackles number 22. There's number 14 for Alberta BC. They look for an option in the back. Now play in the midfield. Kick off the ground to number 15, Alberta BC. Some good pressure here from Alberta BC. And high kick comes towards the 50-meter line. Puck, the ball bouncing around now. Number 11 after it for Alberta BC is play back in the Quebec 50-meter line, which hasn't been a ton in this second half. There's number 15 for Alberta BC. They'll kick it now towards the goal square. Race is on here. Will Quebec try to concede a behind? Nope, number 48 just blasts it out on the full, so that's not necessarily a bad situation for Team Alberta BC. They're going to get an opportunity here deep in the Quebec zone. Again, 42-6 as Alberta BC looking for some offense here, and at this point, odds of a comeback likely slim. They just want to finish this game strong. These players have come a long way for this tournament, so they want to go with their heads out high. Of course, the losing team in this one will have a crack at the consolation against Nova Scotia. So play in the 50-meter zone in front of the Quebec goalpost.
Who's who?
Puck ball comes up towards the middle of the field. And a lot of battle on the ground here. Number 22 for Alberta BC. Kick scored. Here's number 17. Nice kick towards the goal square. And that is a big intercept mark there for number 48 of Quebec. And that is a key scoring opportunity denied from Alberta BC. Kick towards the boundary. And the run is on now. And we're seeing another bounce. A good bounce for number 46, but he's hot now. Manages to evade the tackler. And are they going to say he was tackled high? I think so. And now he's tackled again.
There is two staking views, two here.
And there's some dispute here. In Australian football, you're not allowed to tackle a player above the head. So it was a free kick originally, but he decided to play on, from my understanding, which you can do. And then he was tackled, so as a result, you see a clearance and a ball up. He's getting physical here towards the boundary. So again, to clarify what happened there, the ball carrier for Quebec was hit high, which earned him a free kick. He decided to play on, called advantage, and then he was tackled. Didn't have enough time to get rid of it after the advantage call, so it was a ball up. Here's number 39 for Quebec near the interchange gates. Punch at number 14 and number 46. That is a mark in the midfield. That's where a lot of the action happens. It's not necessarily the players playing up along the goal square that are your key players for teams. Number 1 now for Quebec will boot it towards the boundary. And good sequence of marks here for Quebec. Number 9 kicks it towards the top of the goal square. Pressure on for Quebec. And the play is going to be blown down here. This is the second half of the final game of the men's round robin. Team Quebec leading Team Alberta BC 42-6. Here's number 19 for Team Quebec. He'll kick it into the right pocket. And kick comes back towards midfield as Alberta BC tries to take the play the other way. And now the play comes back to number 14 in the midfield. He'll push that along the ground to number 22. Plays on number 9 for Team Quebec, who leads this contest 42-6. This play has been blown down. Again, the second half of this game, Quebec leads 42-6. Winner goes on to play Ontario in the grand final on the men's side. Here's number 14 for Team Quebec. He'll kick it along the left side. Ball bouncing And number 46 couldn't quite get to it in time. So that will prompt a stoppage. And 42-6 the score in favor of Quebec. We have a throw-in, I believe, from the corner. As long as the team was making an honest opportunity to move the ball, it is a throw-in as opposed to a kick off the boundary for one of the teams. And ball back in play now. 46 will handball that to space. Didn't have anything, so Groundhog Day here as we see another boundary throw-in. 42-6 is the score in favor of Team Quebec against Team Alberta BC. Team Quebec with the offense on again. Team kicks and fires. Quebec doing a good job working up the wings and then working to the middle, but Alberta BC will push the ball the other way. Here's 45 with it for Team Quebec. He loses the ball. What's going to be the call there? That's going to be a free kick off holding the ball. 42-6 the score in favor of Team Quebec. Free kick for Alberta here off the holding the ball call. 5 goals, 12 behinds for Quebec. 1 goal for Alberta BC. Kick towards the goal square here. And the ball goes out of play. We'll see a boundary throw in. And at Humber College here in Ontario, which is the home of the 2018 Men's Australian National Championship. As play continuing on here in the zone of Team Quebec. Quebec having the play in most of this game, especially in the second half. As I said, Alberta BC really came on in the last part of the first half. Luckily, they were showing some good pushback, but then Team Quebec really bring it in this second half. And now the Quebec club in possession, number 1. As Quebec in possession, but play in the Alberta BC end, where it hasn't been a ton, or play in the Quebec end, I should say. The Quebec player with the ball, assessing his options. He'll boot that towards midfield. Good kick. Will that be a mark? Nope, but it's a contest on the ground. Number 9 will take it for Team Alberta BC. Play along the boundary now. And the rush is on for number 5. For Team Alberta. And he'll kick it down the field. We have a player down for Alberta BC. And he is very slow to get up. Play going on, though. That's 54 with a tackle in the midfield for Quebec. Physicality of this game ramping up here. A lot of the action in the midfield. And number 13 will kick it forward. And the player on Alberta BC, he is limping off, and it's his right leg. Doesn't appear to be putting a lot of weight on it. He just stumbled coming off the field, and that is not a good situation. We'll see if we can get an update on him. The play does go on, and there'll be a free kick for Alberta BC, and it'll be at the buzzer, so nothing will come of this. He'll kick it for formality, but the score is going to be 42-26 unless he has a real long boot in him to get to the goal square. He does not, so Quebec, with 5 goals and 12 behinds, wins 42-6. Alberta with 1 goal. So there has been a change in the schedule. We talked about this earlier. There was concern about there being a men's team that had to play back-to-back. So indeed, the women's final has been pushed ahead. That will take place at 1:15. So that's coming up shortly. That will be Team Ontario and Team Quebec in the women's championship. Consolation will take place on the men's side between Alberta, BC, and Nova Scotia. That'll be at 2:30, and the men's grand final between Ontario and Quebec will be at 3:30. So again, the final 5 goals, 12 behinds for Team Quebec, 1 goal for Team Alberta, BC, as Quebec wins 42-6 here, and they'll move on to the grand final to take on Ontario. That game coming up at 3:30, but Right now, the women's final coming at 1:15 between Ontario and Quebec. This has been Patrick McNeil from the City Giants commentating this game, and wish you a great day of footy watching wherever you are, and happy Canada Day again to everybody.